For decades, Canadians were told the same comforting story. $1 million was the golden ticket. Reach that number, and you were free. You could stop working, buy the cabin, and never think about money again. But in 2026, that ticket only buys you a seat at the back of the room. Today, we are revealing why $3 million is the new mathematical safety margin for anyone who wants to stop working without looking over their shoulder for the rest of their life. Let us turn $3 million into a daily reality, because the number on its own means nothing until you spend it. Using the classic 4% rule, a $3 million portfolio generates $120,000 a year before tax. That sounds enormous. It sounds like a win. But this is Canada, and the CRA is a silent partner in almost every dollar you draw. After provincial and federal taxes, that $120,000 draw nets you roughly $85,000 of real spending power. Now walk that $85,000 into the real world. A single weekly grocery run at Loblaws for a family lands far heavier on the receipt than it did 5 years ago. Property taxes on an ordinary, detached home in the GTA can quietly swallow $8, $9, $10,000 a year all by themselves before you have turned on a single light. Add home insurance, a vehicle, the utilities that never seem to stop climbing, and the ordinary maintenance of an ordinary life. Suddenly, $85,000 is not a life of yachts and first-class lounges. It is a comfortable, unremarkable, middle-class existence. And that is the first uncomfortable truth of this entire video. $3 million in 2026 does not buy you luxury. It buys you normal. It buys you the right to stop working and still keep the exact life you already have. Here is the way to picture what is really happening. Your retirement is a high-rise building, and you are going to live at the very top of it for 30 years. $3 million is the structural steel of that building. In the past, the winds of inflation were gentle breezes. The economy was calm, prices crept up slowly, and a modest frame of $1 million in wood was more than enough to keep you standing tall and steady. But in 2026, the economic winds are Gale Force. Costs rise faster, markets swing harder, and the gusts coming out of Ottawa are relentless and unpredictable. If your structure is not built with the heavy steel of a $3 million principle, the building begins to sway. That sway is financial stress. It is the quiet panic of checking your accounts twice a week, and if the winds keep howling against a frame that is simply too light, the windows start to go. Your lifestyle, the trips, the dinners out, the help you wanted to give your grandchildren, the windows begin to shatter one by one. The steel was never there to make the building fancy. It is there so the building does not move when the wind screams. And the wind has already reshaped the entire landscape beneath you. Think about life capacity, the actual living that a sum of money can buy. $3 million in 2026 carries roughly the same life capacity that $1,500,000 carried back in the late 1990s. The number on the page doubled, but the life it purchases barely moved an inch. This is why your parents' definition of rich and your own definition of merely comfortable are two completely different numbers. The finish line did not stay still and wait for you. It quietly ran away. Now, the friction. There is a real cost to financial success in this country, and you need to understand it clearly, because there is a great deal of misinformation floating around on this exact topic right now. You may have heard that Canada raised the capital gains inclusion rate to 2/3 on your larger gains. That change was proposed. It was debated. It genuinely terrified investors across the country. And then in 2025, it was canceled before it ever became law. So let me be precise about where things actually stand today. In 2026, the capital gains inclusion rate in Canada is 50%. Half of every capital gain is added to your taxable income. There is no special $250,000 threshold sitting in force. But do not mistake that for freedom from friction, because the friction is very real. On the money you actually pull out to live on, the drag is unavoidable. Withdrawals from your RRSP and your RRIF are taxed as full income, dollar for dollar, exactly like a paycheck. And once your income climbs past a certain line, the government begins clawing back your OAS on top of that. So the honest truth is this. To put one clean dollar into your pocket to spend, you often have to generate well over $1 in the market and hand the difference to the CRA. The government has increased the friction of your success. And here is the quiet warning for anyone planning ahead. A tax that was proposed once can always be proposed again. The safe assumption is not that this friction stays low forever. The safe assumption is that, over 30 years, it grows. This is exactly where the real difference between $1 million and $3 million finally reveals itself. Picture $1 million as a small island with a single palm tree. It is beautiful. It genuinely works, as long as the weather stays perfect. But the moment a storm rolls in, that one tree is every single thing you have. $3 million is not an island. It is a self-sustaining ecosystem. It is large enough to have its own water cycle, its own compounding, its own rain. And that ecosystem can survive a 5-year drought, a long and brutal market crash, without the people living on it ever once going thirsty. Because you are never forced to sell your assets at the very bottom just to eat. The island feeds itself while the storm passes overhead. That is what wealth actually is in Canada. Wealth is the ability to ignore the weather forecast coming out of Ottawa. It is the freedom to stop refreshing the news, to find out whether you can still afford your own life. Then there is the cost that almost no one plans for, honestly. The cost of living a very long time. If you are fortunate enough to reach 95, the final 10 years are, by a wide margin, the most expensive years of your entire life. And the single biggest line item in those years is care. Private assisted living in the major Canadian hubs now runs somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 a month for one person. Do that math slowly. That is $72,000 to $96,000 a year per person. Inside a public system that is already stretched thin and getting thinner every year. This is precisely why $3 million is not a luxury. It is medical insurance. It is the buffer that lets you purchase quality care and real dignity in a system that is increasingly overwhelmed, instead of quietly hoping a bed opens up somewhere you would never have chosen for yourself. So how do the people who reach this number actually protect it? They layer it. They never leave $3 million sitting in one exposed pile for the CRA to prune at will. They build the structure deliberately across the TFSA, the RRSP, and the RRIF, so that the growth inside the TFSA comes out completely tax-free. The RRSP does its work while it still makes sense, and the taxable draw is arranged carefully to stay under the thresholds that trigger those clawbacks. Think of it as keeping the very top of your structure just out of reach of the CRA's lawnmower. It is the same $3 million on paper, but it is a wildly different amount of money that actually reaches your hands. And the moment you cross that safety margin, the entire strategy has to change. For your whole working life, the single goal was growth. Take the risk, chase the return, build the frame higher. But the day your structure is finally built, you flip the switch. You move from growth to preservation. This is the manual override. You are no longer trying to get rich, because on paper and in real life, you already are. Now, you are simply making certain the building never falls. Fewer bets, more steel, and here is what it actually feels like when it is all done right. On any random morning, at the start of a brand new financial quarter, you wake up and you do not run the numbers. You do not open the app with a knot tightening in your stomach. You look out at your island, fully fortified, its ecosystem quietly humming along, and you realize the calculation is simply over. Because in the end, $3 million was never really about luxury. It was never about yachts or impressing anyone. It is about mathematical silence. True freedom in Canada is the moment your assets grow so large and so structurally sound that you can finally switch off the mental calculator that has been running in the back of your mind for 40 years and just start living. $1 million used to buy the dream. In 2026, $3 million buys you the silence. And that silence is the single most valuable thing money can buy. If you learned something from this video, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.